All right, let's go ahead and get the party started. So, as Elena just said, really want to welcome you and thank you for taking the time to kind of learn a little bit more about this collegiate athletics process. I'm assuming that you all being in this session means that you do have some interest in playing varsity sport in college, or maybe a club sport. Where I am, we're going to talk about all of it, but we're going to focus mainly on the varsity aspect of things. My name is Jeremy Boyce. I am one of the associate directors of admissions at Trinity University and the coordinator of student athlete recruitment and success. And that with us is Elena Wilson, who is also one of our admissions counselors. We want to welcome you. Let you see, this is who's speaking to you. This is back in our glory days, like when it didn't hurt to run. Like that's where it was. So that I played football at Trinity as well as I ran track. I graduated in 2003. This picture is interesting enough from one of the ones I just found online. It was from the national championship that I played in my senior year. And then Elena, you can grab yours if you like.
Yeah, thanks so much. So, hi everyone, my name is Elena Wilson. I'm an admissions counselor and athletic liaison with Trinity University. I work with athletes in tennis, golf, and softball. And so you can see that picture there. I'm also a proud Trinity alum, and I played for the women's tennis team all 4 years. Never competed for a national championship like Jeremy, but it looks like I was in that picture. So it's almost about the same. So as just so you know, you're in great company today with former student athletes, and later in the presentation too, we're actually going to have a current student talk to you guys a little bit more about her experience.
All right. So the thing that we feel like you should probably start with in the college admissions, or the college search in general, but especially as a student athlete, is why. Like, you need to find your why. You need to figure out like what it is that makes you want to do a sport in college. There's a multitude of reasons why someone would try and go on to college and play sport. One being, hey, I want to go on and become a professional athlete. Well, you're going to need to look at a certain type of school and a certain type of athletics program to have a shot at being able to do that. Or I have a true passion for the game. I love playing the sport. I cannot see myself existing without playing the sport. Then great, there's a place for you too. And you see it as a place that's kind of just therapeutic for you. You love being able to play it. It's not your 100% commitment. It's not what you're really driven to do. But there's a place for you to go and compete in college also. So you need to kind of be thinking about that as you're working through this process, and that will guide you as far as the schools that you're considering going to and finding the right fit. It's really a question about what do you want to get out of college. And if the college is going to help you get to the level of academic institution that you want to, or playing a sport that's going to help you do that, then great. You need to be able to use that as your guide as you're working through. So what we're going to go through today will be the game plan.
Yes, and so just like Jeremy said, keep that why in the forefront of your mind as we go through today's game plan, because that really is a great building block for you to set you up for success in this whole recruiting process. It can be overwhelming, so we're going to break it down for you today, starting with recruiting tips, basics, debunking some myths, then a deep dive into admissions, scholarship and financial aid, very important. And then life as a student athlete and the current student perspective. So we will have a student join us, and she's going to share her perspective with you. So please, we encourage you throughout this to use that Q&A feature and send us your questions.
So the recruiting basics. These are the things that are going to help you, first of all, get found. That's one of the first step in all of this is actually figuring out how to get found by the university and levels that you want to play with. And you have to first recognize that academics are very important in the process. Those are going to open up some schools to you. I always say athletics and being talented at a sport is one of those things that can help you get into a little bit better of a school, a little bit better academic school, or that you probably should be getting into. But the sport has that hook that kind of helps you. There's a lot of things in admissions that are hooks that help you get into a school, nudge you up into a different tier of school. than you probably would have been able to achieve if you hadn't been an athlete. So academics are going to be important in the process. You shouldn't put all of your weight on your athletic ability. There's a few people, there's a very small percentage, like less than 1% of student athletes in this country that can put more effort into their athletics and it actually work out for them as far as getting into a big college. It's very rare that can happen. So you need to focus on the academic side of things, making sure that you understand that starting from your freshman year, those grades are going to matter for your transcript. They are going to be important. They're going to be evaluated, and we want to see how successful you'll be there, as you'll be there, as well as where you'll be on the testing side of things. Now, the testing now is kind of a shakier thing because there's a lot more schools who are going test optional. But even as a school going test optional, what that's going to do is turn around and put more emphasis on your academic preparation. It's going to put more emphasis on what types of courses that you took and what grades you got in those courses. That you take some rigor, that you take some advanced courses, that you take some dual credit courses. And depends on the quality of school that you're looking at also. But for a school like Trinity, those things are going to be very important components in the getting admitted to the school as well as receiving a merit scholarship. And then exposure resources. There are a lot of things that are put in place, and you can kind of see on the slide, there's the NCSA site where you can put your information, there's Huddle, there's YouTube, there's a lot of different things that you can do to make sure that coaches can find you. Recognize that there are a lot of programs out there, some of the bigger Division I programs are going to be well-resourced. They'll have someone that's completely dedicated to doing recruitment. But that's rare. There's only a few schools, maybe in the Power 5 conferences, and it probably depends on what sport you're looking at that can really do that. Otherwise, they're going to need some help. They're going to need you to tweet at them. They're going to need you to send your film. They're going to need you to email. You're going to need to pester a little bit to help to make sure that they can find you. And then the NCAA clearinghouse forms, those are things that you're going to have to work with your high school counselor to get them completed if you are looking at a Division I or Division II program. Any program that's going to have an opportunity for you to receive an athletic scholarship, then you have to do the NCAA clearinghouse. Division III does not require you to do an NCAA clearinghouse stamp form. Those forms are kind of set standards for NCAA participation at those levels, but at the Division III level, the institutions decide what those academic standards are going to be. And then important terms for you to know. There's a lot that you're going to need to really understand when it comes to the GPA, the sliding scale, when it comes to what our matrices are going to be as far as merit scholarship and what and academic scholarship are going to be, and then what the financial aid components end up being. There are a lot of things that are going to determine whether you'll be able to get into the school and be able to fund yourself from being able to go into that school. You're going to need to understand what a net price calculator is, understand what an EFC is. So there's a lot of terms that come into play to help you understand the cost and your ability to be accepted there, and you really need to utilize admissions counselors that can really help you navigate through that. And then you need to do your research. And that's really important in this process. It's kind of seeing, all right, what is the likelihood of me being able to go to this particular university or just to be able to play a sport in general. When you look at this information here, you can see that in Division I, there's only about 350 schools. There's a much larger chance of being able to play a Division III program than there is a Division I. And you'll see that the student body, the composition of the student body, 1 in 23 for Division I, and the average is 1 in 6 for Division III, and 1 in 10 for our Division II. So it really does give you an opportunity to see that, hey, there's a higher likelihood of being able to play at these different divisions. It isn't all just about Division I. I know some great athletes coming out of high school that didn't get recruited to Division I, say they just hung up their top. They just hung up the cleats. They retired. And it was like, that wasn't necessary because there were some really competitive Division III programs they could have had an amazing experience at. And then the other part are the scholarships. That is a number that I think probably catches a lot of people off guard, that 57% of the student athletes receive a scholarship, and 60% of the student athletes in Division II receive a scholarship. And then for Division III, 80% of the athletes receive a non-athletic scholarship. There's a much bigger pot. There's a much more opportunity available for student athletes in Division III to receive a merit-based scholarships based off your academic profile than it is to be able to get an athletic scholarship at these different levels. So you'll have to look at, and we'll go into this later as far as the difference between the scholarships that are available even within the Division I level, looking at schools that are equivalency sports versus full scholarship sports. All right, so now recruitment calendars. This is something we're not going to dive into this, but this is something that you need to look into if you're really considering playing at a, especially a Division I or Division II program. You need to understand what a recruitment calendar is. So you can Google and just search NCAA recruitment calendar. Or there's a link to it there also, and it has those recruiting calendars for Division I, Division II. Those are pretty much specifying times in which you can communicate and how you can communicate with coaches from different programs and how they can communicate with you, whether phone calls are available, what emails are options, can you do on campus, can you do office, what's an official visit versus a non-official visit. Those are all things that are going to be built into that calendar and help you understand where they fit. The thing is with Division III, again, there's no money on the table, so there aren't as many restrictions that are in place for us. You can start communicating with a Division III program after your sophomore year, and it's wide open. You can talk to them at tournaments, you can talk to them on campus, the only thing that's an official visit for a Division III program, or pretty much for any program, is if they come and they spend any money to help you get to campus or during your time while you're on campus. Once they spend anything on you, it becomes an official visit. It's unofficial as long as it's completely on your own. So you can visit a campus twice as long as one's official and one is unofficial. But if you do, you cannot do more than one official visit at an institution. So those are all the things in research and terminologies you need to understand, because if you make a mistake with it, even if a coach allows you to make that mistake, it still impacts your eligibility within the NCAA.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, we can't stress enough the importance of that initial research. There's a lot of information out there, and just those stats that you saw in the breakdown, and you'll see all the calendars. It's a lot to take in. So start this process early, right? That's why you're here today. It's great. And I just wanted to rein us back into on about 6 just key tips, recruiting tips for you moving forward. I know Jeremy already mentioned academics matter. We have to keep honing in on that. You need to prepare yourself academically, right? It's important to grow on your athletic field, but also off the field as well, because there is life after college. And coaches and admission staff look at your academics as well. And a second piece would be honestly evaluate yourself. You're going to be seeing a lot of things, hearing a lot of things, but it really will set you up for the best success, I think, and for the best fits if you take a second to self-reflect again on your why. Why do you want to pursue college athletics? What do you want out of your college experience? You need to have those honest conversations with yourself, with your coaches, your mentors, family members. That's really going to set the tone for you. So you're realistically approaching this, because this is a big decision. And third here, be seen effectively. Okay, and there are a lot of ways to do this: attending showcases and camps, clinics. Jeremy mentioned the hurdle. Different pages where you can, link up with the coaches and show your highlights and real-time game footage. Not the edited version, but the actual real-time footage. They love to see that. Many schools will have just a simple online recruiting questionnaire that you can go in and fill out. And guess what else is on there besides, footage and speed? It's academics. So be prepared to display those on the recruiting questionnaires.
One thing I would add to that is that, with our recruitment, especially if you're looking at a selective school like a Trinity, our coaches won't even recruit you if we don't know what your academic profile looks like. If we don't have an idea of what type of GPA you have, or if you do have a test score out there, what that's like, we're not going to recruit you, because we're limited on resources, so we don't have time. So we need to know where you sit and if you're going to be a good chance of you getting admitted to the school. So you need to try and put that information out there also as far as the academics go. And when we talk about honestly evaluating yourself, I know that's more difficult when you're looking at different sports, like for baseball or for football or something like that. Basketball, it's harder to evaluate yourself and then compare yourself to the team the university that you're looking to try and play for. But when you look at other sports, the time sports like track and cross country and swimming and the things of that nature, you can look at the times. You can see where your times fit compared to where they fit, and if you're within range, or hey, by the end of this season I should probably be getting there, then now you have the likelihood that that coach is going to want to actually talk to you and actually recruit you. So you have to be honest with yourself in that regard. If you really want to swim or you really want to run, but you know your times aren't anywhere near what the school is going to be, you're going to have to make a choice of which is more important to you. And lastly, I would say, in being seen effectively, don't go to every ID camp that's available. I know camps right now, there aren't really many of them to go to, but going into camps where you know the level of the program or the coach is not going to be interested in you, like it's a lot of times these camps are put on as ways for coaches to make a little side money, and that's the honest part of it. So if you are really wanting to go to this university and you know there's a good shot of you going to it, then yeah, going to their ID camp might be a good opportunity. Or if you have an ID camp where there's multiple schools and you know there's a few of them that you could definitely probably play at, then go to that camp. But if you're just getting a random letter that says, "Hey, come to my camp," and they've shown no interest in recruiting you, don't think you're going to go to that camp and then all of a sudden they're going to start wanting to recruit you. They'll probably get what they want out of you, which is that fee before you even step foot on campus. So make sure you're being smart about how you utilize different things like camps and clinics.
Yeah, absolutely. And effectively being seen, right? It's so easy with social media and all the technology we have, but it is a double-edged sword. So we don't mean to lecture you, but just make sure that you're being responsible with what you post. Coaches are going to see it. There have been cases in the past and recently just with players getting their scholarships taken away or losing a spot on the team for a racist comment they made on Twitter or some insensitive image or whatever it may be. Just be smart. We can't emphasize that enough because coaches are going to see it. Okay, now this might come as a surprise to some of you. I don't know. Is outside recruiting. Be wary of it. Oftentimes, you can be your best advocate and contact the recruiting coordinator that works with that sport and set up your initial unofficial visit and send them your highlights and start that conversation with them. That doesn't cost any money, but it's when you hire an outside recruiter, it's going to a third party. A lot can get lost in translation. So we would encourage you to maybe take it upon yourself first and see if you can do it that way. And I think that, yeah, to my last point of just advocate for yourself, initiate. It's kind of that whole, like, hey, put me in, coach, I want to play. It's impossible for coaches to know all the players out there that are interested in their specific program. So there's going to be some hand raising that'll be necessary on your part, but we're all athletes here. We're competitive. We're leaders. We like to be heard. So I imagine that this should come pretty naturally to you and don't feel like you need to suppress that. Great. So now that we've equipped you with, some tips on the recruiting process, let's pivot a little bit and go on a deeper dive of admissions, scholarship, and financial aid. Very important stuff. So I have to start by debunking some myths that you have probably come across of, and maybe it's, we've all seen ESPN and the highlights of the top echelon athletes, and that's wonderful, but it doesn't really highlight the process they got to get there, their recruiting, their academics. So we want to make sure we're on the same page. So here's some myths that you've probably heard. A blue chip athlete or a top recruited athlete can get into any colleges. That's false. There is absolutely no guarantee. Each school, you have to meet their academic requirements, meet or exceed the NCAA clearinghouse, right? It's the admissions committee that most of the time we're making the final admissions decision and not the coach. So just something to be aware of. And then the next two definitely go hand in hand. Athletic ability is more important than high school performance, and test scores don't really matter. Again, false. We can't stress enough that you need to continue to focus academics and strike that balance because admissions counselors and coaches are looking at your testing or your GPA and can you be successful in both fields of your life. And then this last one too, I think is a common misperception that D1 recruited athletes only attend D1 programs. So that's your best option. That's your only option. You got to go D1. But you have to remember that there are so many other factors in this process, like scholarship, health, academics, future planning, the social life that you want. So that is not always the case. It's, again, back to your why. Do you want to be a little fish in a big pond, or a big fish in a little pond? You know how the saying goes. There are a lot of factors that go into play. And actually, Jeremy, if you wouldn't mind toggling back to this past slide that we had of the baseball team, the admissions. Yeah, I wanted to highlight them here because this is Trinity's baseball team in 2016 winning the D3 national championship. A lot of these guys could have competed at the D1 level. They're top athletes. So just because you might select a D3 program doesn't mean you're any lesser of an athlete. Please don't forget that. Awesome. All right, so we've done some myth busting, and now we want to give you a little taste of what to expect with the admissions process and who you're going to be in contact with. So as you can imagine, it's going to be very different if you're going at the D1 level, D2, and D3. So just so you know, if you're coming in at D1, little interaction with the admissions staff. It's mostly going to be vetted by the coaches up front, at least. And again, we've mentioned this recruiting coordinator. That's the person that you'll be communicating with and setting up your visits most likely. Now, for D3, you're going to have more interaction with both sides, with both admission staff and coaches, because even if you're guaranteed a spot on the roster, it's not official until you've been accepted based on your academics. So that's where admissions liaisons like Jeremy and myself, where we work with both athletics and admissions, will be your key contact through this.
All right. So now it's kind of understanding the differences in timing that you're going to get at these different levels. So they're really in different levels. Division I, Division II, you have that national letter to that national signing day letter that you would do. In Division III, you don't really have that. It's and we're going to speak specifically in this slide. We're going to talk a bit more about Division III and looking at different schools and how they do the process. Early decision versus early action. And again, early decision is the binding agreement, with early action being the non-binding one. So in Division I, you have that national letter of intent. That's your binding. That is the one thing that you will do in this process that commits you contractually to attend a certain university. Well, there is nothing like that at Division III. The closest thing we have to it is an early decision agreement. And you will find, especially once you get to really selective schools, and some of them will use their early decision agreement like a national letter of intent. Schools like Davidson or St. Amherst or St. Williams, Johns Hopkins, and they will say, you're right, yes, we will to get you in, but you have to go early decision. And they'll do that very early in the process and use that as a way to get you to commit to that program. Now, you have to be careful of that, because early decision, the core foundation of it is to not go to a school and commit early decision there unless you are absolutely sure that's where you want to be. If you know that's a school for you and that's it, then great, go for it. But if not, don't let a school pressure you into going early decision when you aren't really ready to do that process yet. The same thing goes with commitment letters. And the kind of the things that you have to understand is that there's a verbal commitment. And the verbal commitment, it actually means nothing in this entire process. It's just saying, yeah, I'm committed to you. It doesn't bind you, nor does it bind the coach to you to give you a spot on that team or give you a scholarship. So, and even with the national letter of intent and deciding of the program, if you do have that opportunity, an athletic scholarship, then you need to make sure that scholarship is in writing so that you have some documentation that what you have been told is going to actually be it, because it happens from time to time where what you are told is not actually what happens. So then, and here are some interesting stats that we have about the process in general. It's you have about $2.7+ billion in athletic scholarship and provide annual Division I and Division II programs. That's a lot of money that's going between all the programs that we have in D1 and D2. 150,000 plus student athletes are at those levels. But then you have 80% of the D3 student athletes receiving some scholarships out of the 180,000 student athletes that are going there. So it's a much larger percentage of students who are receiving some scholarship. And I think that's kind of, when we look at the scholarships, and we'll dive into this part of things here, and looking at the difference between Division One and kind of D3. And yes, we are skipping over D2 on that, but D2 is kind of like this hybrid thing that's kind of falls in the no man's land as far as the scholarships goes. And typically when you look at those programs, they're usually not as well funded as a Division One program. There's a lot of Division Three programs that are better funded than those. And then typically the academic level of those programs also, like you'll find a lot of Division Three programs that are much stronger academically than a lot of the Division II programs, and same with some of the D1 programs. So you really have to understand the difference between the programs. So Division I, there's a full ride athletic scholarships, and those are scarce. They're very much more scarce than what they're made out to be. So football, men's and women's basketball, and tennis, and women's gymnastics and volleyball. Those are the only sports that can provide a full ride scholarship. Everyone else has to do partial scholarships, and that's equivalency scholarships is what they call it. And for example, I believe with baseball, they have 13.2 or something like that scholarships that they can provide to their entirety of their recruiting class, the entirety of their team actually. So they'll break those scholarships apart to be able to give someone a little bit of scholarship, a little scholarship there. So you can end up having to pay a lot, even though you got an athletic scholarship. The average scholarship is only $11,000. And that's really small when you look at the cost of some of these institutions, especially as an out-of-state student. And then the verbal commitment is meaningless, as I mentioned before. It really doesn't bind you to anything. So you don't want to try and throw those out there unless you're 100% committed, but then you also don't want to 100% buy and cut off all the other opportunities you have because you gave a verbal commitment to someone, or someone gave a verbal commitment to you. You should probably leave all your options on the table at that point. And then remember that these scholarships are not guaranteed all 4 years. There are a few schools within the Power 5 conferences that have moved to the point of guaranteeing the scholarship for 4 years. And sometimes that's not the full cost of attendance, that's covering tuition, and the housing isn't covered. I went to graduate school at the University of North Carolina. It was an amazing school, but there were times where their student athletes didn't have money to be able to go buy food. So there were situations where those programs aren't fully funding us. So even with a full ride scholarship, you have to get a full understanding of what that actually means. And then when we look over at Division III, those scholarships are based off your academic profile, and they're exclusively going to be based off the academic profile. When you look at your ability to get into school, it's going to be the same for the athletes as it will be for the general students. And you have to work through the admissions process on that. Now, the scholarship is a combination. It can be a combination of your merit scholarship as well as your financial aid. There are student athletes that I know at Trinity that received, $27,000 scholarship, and then made it much more affordable for their family to be able to come there with the overall cost. But then there's also students who are very high need, who had a zero contribution that could be provided from their family, and Trinity essentially gave them a full ride scholarship, which is, it's not a scholarship, it's their scholarship plus their full financial aid package. But it ended up making it to where they could come to university and be able to compete as a really strong student athlete and have the cost of it for the most part covered aside of the student loan, the small student loan that they had to take. So it ends up being a better opportunity than what Division I program would have provided to a lot of our student athletes. The average merit grant from private colleges slashes tuition by usually around about 50%, and sometimes a bit more. But the merit scholarships were really helpful in discounting their overall cost. And then as I said, but even with Division I, same thing goes with Division III, verbal commitment means nothing. And then the academic award is provided for all 4 years. And that is a certain amount of stress that ges taken off of you as a student athlete, where from the moment you get here, it has nothing tied to your athletic ability. You could come in and decide, I don't really want to play sports anymore. And it doesn't change anything academically. We got a football player who came in and started off, and then he had a reoccurring injury with his hip and had to have surgery on it. His career is over, but scholarship didn't change one bit. And that's one of the things that takes a little bit of stress off of you as far as the athletic side of things with Division III versus anywhere that's giving you an athletic scholarship, because at any point, for any reason, they could take that scholarship away. If a new coach comes in and doesn't think wants you a part of the program, it can go. If you're not performing the way they want you to perform, you can go. An injury happens, the scholarship can go. So there's a multitude of reasons why you could actually lose that scholarship. So, and the last thing you want to be is at a university playing for a program and you're not fully into it, but you do it because you got to keep the scholarship so you can afford to do it. So Division III doesn't really put you into that situation.
All right, now I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but just thought we should take a reality check real quick. This is why academics are so important, because there is life after college, and really on average only 1 to 2% of NCAA student athletes go pro. And the rest of us are going pro in something else. I think we've all seen the Nike commercial. So just something to keep in the back of your mind is that this is why academics are also really key in your future. So making sure, just a reminder that this decision isn't just a 4-year decision, it's 4 years and beyond.
Now, to that point, this is one of the life of a student athlete is what we really want to go into a bit here. Oh, sorry, I hit the wrong side. And so the life of what it would be like to be, and we're going to give you a comparison again, Division I versus Division III. And we had this picture up of a student. His name is Kim Brell, and he is a former student athlete at Trinity. He played basketball at Trinity, and now he's an asset manager for a real estate company in Miami. Like, he's gone on and he started multiple startups, and he started doing those while at Trinity, continued to do that afterwards, and now is kind of in this particular role. He's been a very, very successful student athlete. And, you know, a lot of times if you know anything about the life of a Division I athlete, you know that you don't really have the opportunity to go out and do many things like this as a student athlete at that level. Well, at Division III, you do have that because your priority at Trinity is going to be being a student athlete and being a student first, though. The student is always going to come first in that. And that's what he was able to do. Now, my experience, I went to graduate school at University of North Carolina, like I mentioned earlier. So this was an example of what a D1 football player's life was like versus a Division III football player. And I don't put this up as a comparison to say, oh, we're so much better than what they do. I'm saying you have to have a realistic expectation of what your life is going to be like. And if you want the Division I schedule, then all right, go that way. If you want the D3 schedule, where you have a lot more time that's dedicated to your academic foundation, the thing that's going to take care of you for the next 40 years, then that's probably what you want to be looking at. And you can see it is a drastic difference between what the student was able to do and the ability to be involved in different clubs and organizations and do internships or start up your own business, things like that as a student. There's been multiple student athletes who have done that at Trinity. Well, that's because the life of an athlete at Trinity allows you to be able to have that. Your off season is truly an off season. You have some workouts in there, but it becomes less of a schedule than what you see there for the in season. So it's a really good opportunity for you to come and get the education while still getting better as a sport. But you're not doing a full-time job as with your sport and then turning around and having to study also. All right. And then there's the striking balance, though. Striking the balance. That's something that we really, really want you to try and understand that's important around what we do at Division I and Division II. You know, playing Division I sports is a full-time job. It really is. And you have to be committed to doing that. That has to be something that you want to do. All the things that you do outside of football have to be approved by a coach. You cannot do anything without them giving you the green light to do it. The ability to be involved and enjoy college, like college life. You know, like I said, at Carolina, it was great. And it's an amazing athletics program. But those guys sacrificed every other aspect of their college experience so that they could do that sport. And some of them did it and went on and had amazing careers from it. But there was only a couple of guys each year that kind of had that opportunity. So you have to recognize, for you, is it worth it? Is it worth it to take that risk? And majority of the time in college is spent only with your teammates in Division I. You're housed with them. You're working out with them in the morning. You have a little time in between with other people, but then you're just doing the stuff with your sport. So it takes away from your networking ability also, and people getting to know people who will be great resources for you once you finish up. And then, but again, you're going to have a strong network within your sport. And then studying abroad is typically not an option either, which our student athletes are typically able to go study abroad if you fit it within your schedule. And that's something that we find that a lot of our student athletes will take advantage of.
Yeah, so on the other side of the spectrum, we have D3, and a lot of it's just kind of opposites, right? Athletics and your coaches are working around your academics because academics is going to be top priority every day. So you're encouraged to do internships, different research, and just all kinds of experiential learning opportunities. Those are going to be available and encouraged for you because you can also, you have time to do them. You have this flexibility to maybe engage and grapple with the tougher subjects if you want, or, you know, really dive into that engineering lab that you wanted to take. You can do that at the D3 level. It's not easy. It's going to be tough, but you're going to have a very supportive environment around you to lift you up on both your academics and athletics side. And just from a personal note as well, I was a double major at Trinity while I was also a student athlete. I was able to study abroad for 2 different summers. I had my research funded, and I also had an internship with the San Antonio Spurs my junior and senior year. And then I graduated on time in 4 years. And that's not just a story unique to me. I feel like a lot of D3 athletes also have similar experiences where you can really do a lot in your 4 years.
I mean, this is an example of one of our current student athletes. I believe he's a junior football player, and kind of giving you his kind of testimony as to his experience and why he feels as though Trinity is a great place for him. You know, looking at what our student athletes are experiencing, and I think sometimes it's better for you to get that experience from me, seeing as my experience is pretty outdated since it's from almost 2 decades ago. It kind of hurts me to say that. But yeah, it's like 2 decades ago. So that made us think, hey, maybe we should bring somebody in who's currently dealing with it right now. So we wanted to make sure that you have an opportunity to get more questions answered directly. So we will go into the Q&A. Elaine, for some reason, I can't see the Q&A questions, but is there a couple that we should address right now before we toss it over to Jordan? And then Jordan, like, if you have questions for Jordan that are more focused on the experience of a current student athlete, please throw those into the question and answer.
Yeah, so the first question we got, how many hours on average does training for a sport take in a college student's life? This was asked earlier on in the presentation before we kind of parsed out the differences of a D1 schedule versus a D3. Jeremy and I can speak personally to the D3 aspect. You know, it varies from sport to sport, but maybe, you know, 2.5 to 3 hours a day. Maybe you have a morning practice and some weights in the afternoon or something like that, but it's manageable. But to the D1 level, it's going to be much more lopsided, heavy towards time spent on the field, time spent in the weight room and watching film.
There's numbers that we have for in the survey that was done for student athletes, and like playing football required 43.3 hours a week for football, 42.1 for basketball, and for baseball it was 39.2 for basketball for both men and women, around the same. So it's literally a full-time job to do it at those levels, whereas for us it is a much more manageable process that's built in. It isn't going to be too much more difficult from what you've done in high school. I think the other element, though, that when you look at a program like Trinity that has such a successful athletics program, is that students do things on their own. They put in time where they're not required to do it, but they kind of take some time to do things on their own to get themselves to that level and make sure they're in the shape they need to be. But it takes a student with a bit more personal drive to be successful at this level.
The next 2 questions are kind of related to the difference between high school academics and athletic balance and college. So I think we're gonna let our current student that's on the webinar today address that. And then also, do athletes go to training camps during the year? I'm not sure if that question is referring to during your high school years or during college, but in college, I mean, all of your training, it's specific to your sport. Some sports would call it a camp. And then, Jeremy, I think one more question we could answer before handing it over to Jordan is going to be scholarships related. So how many scholarships can you get as a D3 athlete?
Yeah. So as a scholarships you would get as a D3 athlete, they're going to come from two pools, and they're going to come from the same pools that it comes from a D3 non-athlete. It's going to be your merit-based scholarship. It's going to be based off your academic profile and the work you've done there, and looking at primarily your, if you took a test, what the test score is going to be, what your GPA, your rigor, and then your writing and all the elements that go into the actual application. So it's incredibly important. I know sometimes with some scholarship programs and some programs, especially those who don't have as strong an academic reputation, it's just a matter of getting an application in. The coach is like, let's get that. We're going to get you in. Just get the application in. So people just kind of do, a little bit of half effort with the application, and that doesn't fly at a place that like Trinity, that's selective. So any school you're looking at that's at this level, you have to put the effort into the application because you still got to get in. As Lana mentioned earlier, you got to get into the school. The coaches can say what they want, but you still got to get into the school. So doing the application. So that's going to determine the merit side of things. And then on the financial aid, that's going to be completely based off of your financial aid forms, the FAFSA and CSS profile, and where it comes back as saying what your family can afford to pay per year. And then once we have that, then we can determine what type of additional aid is necessary to make it affordable for you to come to Trinity. And most schools are going to do something along those same lines. Now, Division II has the ability to kind of couple things a little bit more, so they can pull from 3 different pools, which would be the merit, the athletic money, as well as the financial aid, and they can kind of combine at different levels to try and make it affordable for you. In Division I, they typically are not providing much of a merit scholarship at those Division I programs. They're providing, if you're an athlete. If you're an athlete, you're typically going to get in based off of the athletic scholarship. And sometimes you'll be able to get through it as far as the financial aid side, depending on what the resources are available at that school. But as far as a merit scholarship, combining that with an athletic scholarship, that's very rare to have that happen at a Division I program, but it does happen from time to time. All right. So I guess now we can toss it over to our guest of honor, Jordan Duran, class of 21. So Jordan, you can take it away.
Sounds good. So hi guys, my name's Jordan. Just a little bit about myself. I'm going to be a senior this fall at Trinity, and I run cross country and track at the school. And just speaking a little to my experience, so way back when, now it feels like forever ago, when I was looking at schools, kind of what like Elena was saying earlier, I really had to take a look and be honest with myself of what I wanted and what I expected from myself over the next 4 years and what the end goal was. And for me, that was definitely putting an emphasis on academics. And so looked at a bunch of schools, and after I was able to talk with Coach Dom, who's the head cross country coach at Trinity, and come down and visit the school, I fell in love with it. I like to joke that I came down in February to visit, and I'm from Colorado, so I left a snowstorm back home, and I came down to beautiful Texas weather, and I truly just fell in love with it. And that feeling continued over to when I started competing at the school. And so I can kind of walk you guys through a little bit about like what cross country, the schedule, and like what my day-to-day life looks like to get you a better idea of what academics and athletics, the balance looks like. So for cross country, we have practices in the morning, 6 out of 7 days a week. And those for us start at 6:30. And depending on the day, it usually ranges from like an hour to 2 hours. But we get out there, we get our runs done. And then 2 to 3 days a week, we'll also have weights in the afternoon. Again, speaking to the schedule though, it's very flexible. So if you have class during weights, there's time to make it up later. There's time to get it in before if that works better, because there is that emphasis on your academics, which is super awesome. And then just adding in the meet schedule for cross country too, we only compete about 6 or 7 times. So it doesn't affect it as much. I laugh that I feel like we spend more time practicing than anything else just to race a few times, but it does work out. There is a balance you have to try to find. It's sometimes tough, takes a little bit of a learning curve, especially for those first few weeks, because school is definitely tough at Trinity. But I found that like managing my expectations, setting out a planner, getting schedule for the week down does help. If you know what you're up against, you can tackle it and you can make a list and get things done one by one. So I found that's really helped over my time. What are some other questions that you guys have? Anything that I can answer?
Well, Jordan, there was one other question that was more specific to how was the transition between being a high school athlete in Colorado to now being a collegiate athlete coming into your senior year now? But what was the transition to, you know, having a good balance between athletics and academics? Because, you know, both are now at an elite level. So how did you navigate that process, and what advice would you have for students at this stage in the game?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So looking back on my experience, I found what really helped me through the transition was my team. And so if there's any advice I could give everybody out there looking, is find a place where you feel comfortable and that you like the people that you're surrounding yourself with, that you trust them, you trust their advice. Doesn't have to be all of them, but the good majority that you're going to spend your time with. You want to have friends in there. And so I found that really helped, to be able to have people that if I was struggling in a class, if something came up, I could go and talk to them and work through that. Again, touching on that transition was a tough one, especially with the distance moving down to Texas. But being able to surround myself with people that I really enjoyed definitely helped.
That's great. Did anything surprise you when you first started collegiate athletics and in a different state?
It's kind of funny, but the biggest thing that I found myself surprised by was that cross-country practices were in the morning. Apparently that's a normal thing for high schoolers in Texas, but coming from Colorado, where it's not 100 degrees in the afternoon, we never had to worry about moving practices earlier. So that was definitely a surprise, like from the athletic side. Academically, I'd say I was surprised at how much time the classes demanded outside of it. And so again, just like touching on like finding that balance was so essential. And again, just having people that if I was struggling in a class, if I didn't know how to manage the time, I had people that I could go and ask, and they helped me out, which was so great.
That's awesome. And we got a question for you here. Jordan, what is the one thing you wish you knew your senior year in high school while applying for college?
That you have a ton of options and that you need to keep looking until you find the right fit. It kind of goes back to your like finding your why with that too. But one thing I wish I would have known was like, take your time, breathe, and then find your why, and that'll lead you to the right fit. I got lucky. I found the right place for me, but I pushed it off and then I was stressed. So definitely would recommend that.
And I would say for another piece of advice too, I mean, during this time, a lot of colleges aren't open for visitors right now, but when everything is open, do a recruitment visit and stay overnight with a potential future teammate. That was one of the things that really set Trinity apart for me is hanging out with a future teammate. It really just put things in perspective for me and what they value and how their daily life is being an athlete and being a student.
Totally agree with that.
And one other thing that I would emphasize is that not every school, like I would say, don't get caught up in the divisions thing. It's looking at a school that's going to be the right fit for you. We do have, as Lana mentioned earlier, there were guys on our baseball team that had opportunities to play D1, that could have played D1, but you'll find that same thing happening with our football program, with our basketball program, with our track program, with some of our golf programs. We've had some really, really strong student athletes who chose to come to a place like Trinity because it was going to help them achieve their goals academically. And even within our soccer program, we've had a few players who've gone on to play pro. From here. Our head football coach played in the NFL for 9 seasons and then 2 Super Bowls. So there's an opportunity to do it. Yes, it's much rarer to happen at this level, but it's there. And then also with that, there is a perception that the best athletes go D1, the next best go D2, and D3 is where the worst go, and the facilities kind of fall in the same line. But the reality is, yes, in the Power Five conferences, that's where typically where you're going to find some of the premier athletes going to those. But once you get out of the Power Five conferences, like I showed you before, there's about 300, probably about 300 other schools that aren't Division One that we all think of when we think of Division One. And sometimes those facilities and the resources that are there to support the student athlete, especially when you get to the Olympic sports, all the sports outside of football and basketball, they're really underfunded and the facilities aren't as great. So what we've invested in at a place like Trinity, and there's other Division III universities that invest heavily in making sure that the resources that you have as far as facilities go, or your assistant coaches or your strength and conditioning coaches, those things are pretty phenomenal at this level, and much more available to you. So I would say don't judge a book by its division. Let's put it that way. So go ahead and look at all the options that are available to you. And I would say if someone reaches out to you and shows some genuine interest, it behooves you just to go ahead and look back at them. And even if you've never heard of them before, and if it's like, nah, this ain't going to fit, then great. But I found Trinity because Trinity found me. And I didn't know anything about it until they came along recruiting me. So I would definitely recommend looking at a school and looking back at a school if they're interested in you.
I love that, Jeremy. Don't judge a school by the division. That is great, and prompts you guys to do your research. Jordan, we have another question for you, and it's COVID related. Okay, how has COVID impacted you as a student athlete? So I assume that's kind of getting at scheduling, practice, competition. So feel free to answer that however you'd like.
Yeah, of course. So we were actually in the middle of track when everything went down. We were back home for spring break when it happened. So naturally our season got canceled, which was tough. Thankfully, I'm in a sport where I can continue training by myself. It's not like I need a team like soccer or football or things like that. So as far as our schedule went, we continued doing workouts and stuff such as we were in track. And then at the end of our makeshift season, we took a little break, took a few days just to kind of clear our minds, rest our bodies, which was really great. And then we started up for summer training. Our coach actually went forward with the plans like we would for any other season, which I think was really great. It kind of gave us a sense of normalcy and something to look forward to. Hopefully we'll be back on campus this fall and everything will go all right with the season. So as of right now, I am actually training. I'm running every day, which I love. I'm in a beautiful place to run, so I can't complain. But yeah, it's definitely tested our team dynamics in the sense that normally we're away from each other for a few months at most. And now it's on upwards of 4 or 5, I think even 6 months. And so just being mindful of that and trying to keep in contact with one another, because we will hopefully be back together sometime, and trying to be there for one another. That's been probably the biggest challenge as far as like training as a team goes. But yeah, that's been kind of the experience on this end.
Jordan, are your professors understanding and easy to work with in terms of your classes and practice schedules, conflicts? That's a great question. We didn't even talk about. Yeah, so speak a little bit about, how you navigate your busy athletic schedule with your academic schedule.
Yeah, that's a really great question, actually. I'd say the biggest thing that I found is it's great to go in. Trinity's great with their professors have to have office hours. So at each semester, I go in at the beginning during their office hours and start forming that friendship with them, relationship, and tell them a little bit about my situation, that I am a student athlete. And usually I come in with a list of dates that I know I will be gone during the semester just for travel purposes. And I found personally that if the more I can be upfront and communicative about what I'm going to miss and when I'm going to miss, the more understanding they are. But with that said, I've never run into a problem with my professors at Trinity. They've always been super accommodating, helping me work around if I'm missing tests, missing just in-class stuff, and helping me make it up either before or after, really working with my schedule, which has truly been great. It kind of takes that little extra bit of stress off of that. But also just talking to that, you definitely need to be prepared and upfront with those things. I feel like it would be a totally different situation if I went to my professors the morning of something happening and saying, I can't be at class today. That would probably not fly over well. So again, just being really prepared and talking with them beforeand, it's all worked out for me. So.
Yeah, I think communication is key, but then also taking responsibility and having your planner set out for the semester. Um, a handful of times too, I would tell a professor that, oh, I have a match conflict. Can I take this at a different time? And they said, yes, of course. And then I'd be out on the court warming up for my match, and I'd see my professor like waving at me in the stands, unbeknownst to me, but just little things like that too. I think at the D3 level, the professors really care about you outside of the classroom as well. And there is a question here, Jordan, that what do I do if a coach or a professor, maybe in this case, doesn't respond to my emails? Oh wait, no, I think, here we go. What do I do if a coach doesn't respond to my emails? Should I take them as not being interested? And maybe Jeremy can speak on this as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely, that could be the case. They could not be interested. Or you can imagine the coach is getting a lot of emails and they're getting a lot of contact. So sometimes it takes someone else kind of nudging that forward, which we mentioned in the slides earlier, the recruitment coordinator. If there's a recruitment coordinator for, like a lot of times people reach out to the head coach, and the head coach is probably one of the busiest people there, so they're probably not going to respond to you. But the recruiting coordinator is probably the person you want to reach out to within the program. And then, a lot of places will have someone like Elena or myself that work in admissions but handle student athlete recruitment. Sometimes I'll nudge a coach and say, hey, just get a response back to the student one way or another. And sometimes they literally just miss them because there's so much going on. And especially if you're doing it during the season, it's kind of hard once their schedules get kind of overbooked. So I would say don't take it personally. There's a place for everyone, and don't let it knock you down, but then also try and utilize the other avenues that might be available at an institution to help you get on the coach's radar.
So Jeremy, it's been asked, what does it mean if a coach asks me what other schools I'm talking to? And quotes, this is coming from a soccer player, and another coach is asking them what schools they're talking to.
Oh, give me a lot of things speculating over it. Sometimes if a coach doesn't know anything about you and they know that you're being recruited by this other program, it gives them some type of context of how good of a player you are. So if you're saying, oh, I'm being recruited by this program and that program, then it gives them an idea of like, okay, well, yeah, that program beat us last year, so they probably have some pretty good players. They're looking at it, I should probably look too, and then I'll be a little bit more interested. Sometimes they're looking for shortcuts to be able to get an evaluation of you if they don't really know much about you at that point. So I would imagine that might be the avenue that the coach is using to try and figure out where you would stand, especially if they don't know anything about you at that time. Sometimes if a coach is asking that and they do know about you, but they're asking what the programs you're looking at, they're trying to gauge kind of what type of timeline they have. If there's going to be other universities that are going to be able to put the time limit on you to say there's a scholarship available, or you're going to need to go ED in order to be able to go there. So, but yeah, you kind of have to, a lot of times with these coaches, you got to be pretty straightforward and direct with them and gets to the point, because some of them will kind of play around a little bit to try and give themselves more room to recruit and keep their options open. But sometimes it takes you to be able to really get the hard answers out of them, and you got to be a bit more aggressive to do that. And use people like us to help.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't be afraid to call on us. And actually, there was another question here earlier, more pertaining to scholarships and financial aid and how to pay for this whole process if you don't go the D1 route. And just know everyone's situation is different. And that's where, working with Jeremy and myself to walk you through your potential merit scholarship and your need-based financial aid. We do both at Trinity. So I can't answer that question for you right up front at this moment. But we would be willing to work with you throughout the application process to get you those numbers and make sure that you feel comfortable making this big decision.
Yeah, we'll do a lot to help do the pre-reads for you and help you understand where things would be financially. And I would say don't cut out any school based off of the price tag. Trinity costs about $62,000 a year to go here. There's hardly anyone at the school that's paying that much to go here. So it's going to vary based off of your family's financial situation and your academic profile. So don't let that deter you. go through the process, have the conversations, and there'll be people there like us in admissions who can help you get a very, very good idea of how financially feasible things will be early on in the process. All right. Are there more questions?
I think we cleared out all the Q&A. Maybe we'll stay on for a moment longer to see if anything else pops up, but we really appreciate your engagement. This has been wonderful. And we have another question. Is Trinity test optional for 2021? Yes, and actually for the next 3 years. So we are test optional. It'll be up to you. You won't be disadvantaged whichever way you decide to go. But just keep in mind that we're going to be looking more at other aspects of your application, right? So the rigor of your GPA and letter of recommendation or an interview with us, definitely reach out to us and we can then help speak on your behalf. I know Jeremy is fantastic about that. We really try to get to know you guys on a personal level and then speak to your behalf in the admissions committee. Oh, okay, and then, yeah, another question says, will a good test score still be helpful for merit aid? It certainly won't hurt you. We are still in the process of formalizing our new scholarship awarding model that should be out later in the summer, and we're usually pretty transparent with the scholarship awarding grid there. So if you got a great test score, if it's within our averages or above, that might be a case where we would say, yeah, we would encourage you to submit that.
All right, well, here you can see there's still room to answer questions from if you email us directly. We are more than happy to reach out and receive emails from you all and get back to you. And then, if there's questions about certain programs or things that are specific to your situation, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We like to engage with the students, going to help you through the process. It's kind of a crazy process, to be honest with you. I wish that every coach was kind of, very transparent and honest in how they do things, but that's just not the case. So we're here to help you, especially when it comes to Trinity. Our coaches are usually pretty good about it, though. Our coaches will let you know exactly where you are. If they're not interested, they typically will let you know. But we can sometimes help you get that information as needed. So we really appreciate you taking the time to listen to us today. And here are our emails and our office numbers, so don't hesitate to contact us by either one of those.
Yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been great, and thanks to Jordan too. Our student athletes are awesome, and we can't wait to be back on campus and cheering them on.
All right. Well, I think we saw another couple questions pop up, but just shoot those to us via email, because I think we have to shut down here. But just shoot those questions to us via email, and we will get right back to you. But thank you, and y'all enjoy the rest of your week.